evening and welcome to tonight's show here on DJNTV. Tonight, we're going to get an update on what's going on with the SBA and all the different things that are going on for the individual people, the sole proprietors out there. And we're joined by Jerry Bazata. Good evening, Jerry.
Hey, John, how are you?
I'm doing well, doing well. Jerry, we got a lot of kind of updates to be bringing folks because this is one of the most evolving government situations I've ever been witnessing. I'm sure it's happened before, but it seems like from day to day to week, it just changes.
Yeah, there's constant changes, and as you read the updates that come through, they're thinking through the whole process, and I think it's just as the SBA and the government looks at just how vast this funding program has become, how do we streamline it? How do we make it more simpler? How do we kind of get the money into people's hands? So I think the first thing we've got to focus in on is it has been extended to May 31st.
Okay.
That means that you have up until May 31st to get the application to your bank and the bank to get it to the SBA. Now, it does not mean that you have to be approved by May 31st. Under the current extension of the program, the SBA will have an additional 30 days to fund any of those applications. So the key thing is if you're going for round one or round two, you have the bank that you're dealing with, whether it's Lendio, whether it's a fintech, whether it's a credit union, whatever, they have up until May 31st to actually get it to the SBA. So that's key number one.
And as you said, that can be round one or round the first draw or second draw. And the reason why a lot of DJs we didn't qualify in that first round is because our Schedule C bottom line number, for those of you who it's line, I think 31. But our net income was way too low or a negative number. So we didn't qualify back then. But now for that first round draw, they've changed things.
Yeah, they have changed it. And again, you do qualify for the first round draw. So, when we look at a lot of the sole proprietorships out there that were Schedule Cs, you now can go off of gross income. And in fact, a lot of the banks and institutions, when this change came out and we were going off of gross income, a lot of the banks were going back to clients and saying, do you want to amend your application? So again, if you didn't catch up with that change and you've got an application in process and you're a Schedule C and you went off of net income, you can go back and have them amended. Even if they've sent the application to the SBA, they can withdraw the application from the SBA and then they can resubmit it again under the new program.
But once it's funded though, and it's been forgiven, so for some businesses, they did this immediately back, they had just a small number or amount. Once it's been forgiven, that's pretty much, it's all done with that one. And now they're looking at the second draw.
Right. Yeah. Right. So we're really talking about those that are the first time people or those that are going second time. So maybe someone had a small net income, or a reasonable net income number back then in the first round a year ago this month. Now, it's hard to believe 1 year. I mean, we've been in the midst of this for 1 year. We thought we'd be one and done and we'd be finished and we'd be back to normal.
Yeah, by June.
Yeah, that was wishful thinking. So we're now at this point where, yes, you can look at it. So those that are going to the second draw, if you're Schedule C, make sure you're evaluating, is it off of gross income or is it off of net income? And the other question that's come up repeatedly is if I have payroll, can I still, and I'm a Schedule C, can I still go off of gross income? Yes, you can. You just have to subtract those people that you gave payroll to. That gets calculated into the calculation of what you're eligible for. So it's a very simple form. It's not difficult at all, and it walks you through the calculation process. So that's what we want to be clear on.
Jerry, you mentioned the amending of the loan for the first draw. Now, is that amending, say if somebody just did the second draw, but they haven't had it all forgiven and such yet, if they did the second draw immediately when it was available, and it's a lower number than what it could have been with the change that came out after the second draw started, can they amend second draw applications? Or
as long as they haven't taken the funding. So as long as SBA hasn't approved it and the bank or whatever institution has not funded the loan, they can go back and amend it. But John, this is also going to work us into the next phase of it. And that is that you are allowed to go for round, if you are in round 2, this recent round, let's just call it this recent round of funding so we don't confuse people. If you went and you got an initial draw your first time because you applied for the PPP loan under the gross income rule, you are allowed to file a second time under round 2 and get a second round of funding. However, you cannot do that until you exhaust your 8-week period. So if you got money, say the middle of March, by the middle of May, you can submit a second round funding application under the same premise. All right. Mm-hmm. You will have to show the 25% in revenue reduction, which you can use off your Schedule C for either 19 or 20. And if you're going for a second round, you can still revert back to 2019. So maybe I need to walk through that again.
Yeah, please.
Yep. So you didn't get any funding of PPP loans back in April of 2020. 2020 rolls around, you're still looking at your Schedule Cs back in early January, February. I can't apply because I got either negative net income or little income or nothing at all. Now they come and they amend the rules around March 1st that says, hey, you can now go off of gross income. You're excited, you go in, you apply for your first round of payroll protection funding, and you get approved for $10,000. Your disbursement date is, say, March 15th. Let me correct that. Your disbursement date is March 15th. From your disbursement date, you have to wait 8 weeks. That 8 weeks will most likely bring you to the middle of May. At that point, because it hasn't hit May 31st, you have the option of applying for a second round of funding under the same premise. So you can apply for another PPP loan. You can still go off your 2019 Schedule C. The only difference is you have to submit your 2020 Schedule C to show that you had a 25% reduction in revenues between 2019 and 2020. If you didn't have that 25% reduction in revenues, then you cannot apply for the second round of funding. I think for most of us in the mobile DJ business, we're going to fall into that category pretty quickly.
Really quickly. So, yes, it was really sad when I did the 2020.
That's the least of many of our worries. But you want to sort of get a hold of, and you want to go back to the same bank or institution that you dealt with on the first PPP loan based on gross income, because they're going to have all your paperwork, they're going to have all your documentation, they'll be able to justify it. Mm-hmm. The other clause, and we didn't discuss this in the other calls, but this has come up, as part of the gross funding for sole proprietorships, because on the Schedule C you don't have the date you were started in business, all right? The banks have to verify you were in business on February 20th, 2020. So they're going to look at a couple of different things, either bank statements that show you have money moving in and out of your business account, okay? Maybe copies of contracts that you took at that period of time, around that time. They need to verify you were in business. So they're going to look at it a couple of different ways. The fastest way for them to look at it is, hey, send us a couple of your bank statements, or if you did write yourself a payroll check, or if you had some income coming in around the 20th of February, you deposited those contractual funds into your operating account. They need to just have that on hand. That will not go to the SBA, but they need to have it in the file to verify and validate that you were in business on February 20th, 2020. So,
and with a lot of banks now, for those who haven't done anything with the PPP, a lot of banks are using an online type portal to handle the paperwork.
Almost every bank that I've been aware of is using an online portal. Now, if some of the banks have opted not to continue, I would say go out to Lendio, or go out to some of the other portals like PayPal or whatever. Mm-hmm. They are still accepting applications, but certainly check with your existing bank to see what they're doing. I know the average dollar amounts, and it was just concerned about funding's going to run out. We've actually seen a decrease in the average size of the loan significantly.
Really?
So, yeah, a lot of the bigger companies that would have qualified for a second round of funding have gone through it already. They've already dealt with it. So I would say right now what we're seeing is probably a lot of the sole proprietorships that are applying.
That would make sense, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. You're not seeing people applying for the big chunks that they used to apply for. That was in the first round where we saw everybody coming into it. There's a lot of, I would say a good majority or vast majority have had to deal with the 25% decrease in revenue rule, which did not apply. And I think just other businesses have become somewhat stabilized. So, but for the DJ community, since we're still seeing postponements, I mean, I had another one June 12th that just got postponed. So I think there's still this concern about large gatherings, and we're hearing it in the news. So I would encourage all the DJs out there that if you haven't got both round one and or round two, I would highly consider doing it, especially if you're Schedule C right now.
Yeah.
So
excellent. Let's talk a little bit about the forgiveness process for those who either haven't started yet, or even if you have. Are there any changes in that realm?
Yeah, they've actually come out with an easy form, and most banks have it online, or every bank has it online. SBA, you can go out and look at it, and it's simply you're putting in the amount, you're attesting that you used it for payroll. So it's going to ask you some very generic questions. It's going to ask you how much did you get, how much did you use towards payroll, if you used it for any expenses. You do not have to submit documentation with that. You simply are attesting, and this is for any PPP loans that are under $150,000. So, but it doesn't preclude you from getting the documentation. So what most sole proprietorships are doing is they're writing themselves a payroll check over the 8-week period or over a 4-week period. If they got $10,000 or $12,000 divided by 4, they're writing themselves a check from their operating account to their personal account for $3,000. They have their 2 bank statements. You want to have that backup documentation that you used it for payroll, but you don't necessarily have to submit it with the payroll application, with the forgiveness application to the banks. You're simply just taking that form, you're attesting to it, and it's going to the SBA. Now, if the SBA gets the forgiveness application, hopefully they're rubber stamping a lot of these, which I understand they're looking at it, making sure it's complete, make sure you tested it to it. They do reserve the right to come back and ask you for the backup information. It's not necessarily the bank, but it is the SBA. So be prepared to supply that. But just don't go, I got $12,000, I put it in my business account, and I'm just going to let it sit there. They're going to say, how did you use it for payroll? Well, you want to move it from your business account to your personal account. That's payroll.
And so, having that paper trail could be vital in this process.
Yeah. So, but that's really the most recent changes, John. There are 2 other things that don't directly reflect us, but I know most DJs are going to be hearing about this. There is the shuttered venue grants. And again, I've had some questions because some DJs work at nightclubs and have asked, I want to help them out. Is that possible? No, the shuttered venue is for theaters, any place that has fixed seating. And part of that grant program is you would have had to either refund subscriptions or ticket sales. That's what the shuttered venue grant is. There's also $26.8 billion that's on the Restaurant Revitalization Act. And that's really to help restaurants that had significant revenue drop between 2019 and 2020. That grant program has not come out yet, but both of those are driven by if you've gotten PPP money, you'll be subtracted from what those grants are available. But, there has been a number of questions regarding the shuttered venue. Unless your chairs are nailed to the floor, no, that venue that you work at, that nightclub or whatever, is most likely not going to qualify for the shuttered venue grants. So, but certainly if you want to be a hero to, whatever restaurant you do karaoke at or you do trivia nights, most of them are hearing from the restaurant associations that that's available. So,
Maybe try to get them that information for their business. That's important stuff.
Yeah.
That is horrifying. Well,
But
excellent.
other than that, from the banking perspective, John, there's an active lending market out there. Rates are still great. They're still low. There's a lot of money available as traditional SBA loans. The banks are willing to lend out there. So, as people look at what's available in vehicles, if you're looking at financing equipment, a lot of the dealers like IDJ Now or Netflix or, Ben Stowe, all of those different places that have, and I said Netflix is really, sorry, Ben, I didn't mean to give you the wrong company name there. The 0% financing, take advantage of some of those right now. Mm-hmm. They're very, very generous out there. Now's the time to kind of invest in a little bit of gear where you've got some of the PPP money coming in to help supplement your payroll and those financing options out there. I know SBA and a lot of the local economic development groups throughout the country are really willing to step up to small businesses and give them a hand.
Sure. So, yeah. I think that the idea of being able to take that and invest it in the business and purchase the gear, as you were saying, I think is going to be something a lot of DJs are going to need to look at, because we will have a tax bill at some point in time coming in the future.
Yep. Oh, I think we all will have a tax bill coming at some point in the future. Yeah. And again, we continue to see the pent up demand. People are going to want to get together. They're going to want to celebrate. I'm seeing, and I don't know what other DJs are seeing out there, but I'm getting phone calls about, well, we had a simple ceremony out on the water, or we had a simple ceremony, and now we want to have that party. Yeah. And we want to be under a tent at somebody's house, or we're looking at various venues. So I think that backlog is going to come rushing in pretty quickly.
I think so, yeah. Whether that's going to be late this year or even into next year. But I think eventually when that door is open, it's going to be crazy.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm going to put a plug out there too. We've all been in a tough time, John, and from a financial perspective, from somebody that's here, you've got the Marquee Show coming up.
Yes.
Take some of this and invest yourself in some in these programs. The Marquee Show that's coming up in June out in Chicago. If your season hasn't ramped up, get out there with Keith and those speakers, because a lot of what you're going to hear is going to get you geared up to where you need to be. Mm-hmm. So we've all been worried about paying the bills and getting the money in. Now, from a financial perspective, where is the next step? What can we invest in? Where can we grow? And I'm seeing that with manufacturing. We're getting a lot more calls about companies wanting to buy equipment, get supply chains moving again. Think about that for yourself. The DJ Expo that's coming up in August, if that's a better time for you to go to. I know, ARM DJs in Northwest, whatever the different groups are that are out there, it's really worth your time to take a little bit of this extra found money and invest it in your career and yourself. So,
for sure.
Again, my two big choices are the Marquee Show with Keith. I think he's doing a fantastic job of putting wonderful speakers together, or of course the DJ Expo, which has been a mainstay for many years. So take some of that money and invest in your business.
Yeah, very good advice. I think for a lot of people, if nothing else, if you're not back to business yet, or you haven't gotten back to business as normal, for lack of a better way to describe it, just being around others to help get your head back in the game is, I think, a tremendous value.
Yep. And again, even too, from the, where are you spending money? What are you doing in advertising? What should I be doing? Because now dollars are tight than ever. Before we would, throw caution to the wind because we were on a high of earning revenue and opportunities were knocking at our door. So being able to do that, I think, is going to be a real plus. And if you need to go for a loan, saying that, hey, I went to education, I learned about what I'm going to do, I'm going to write this in my business plan. It's going to be important because we want to know, from the banker's perspective, as a commercial lender, are you here for the long term? Mm-hmm. And that's really the questions we're asking is not what happened in the past. We're asking how you're going to go forward. Tell us what you did. Yes, we want to know how COVID impacted your business. We're getting to know it pretty intimately right now, but I think going forward, what are you doing for yourself? How are you planning yourself out? What's your marketing tools? How are you reinvesting? How are you building your client base? Because it's ultimately going to come down to revenues.
Very true. And for many people, it might be almost like completely starting over, after 20 years in the industry. Because there's people who are going to a Marquee Show or DJ Expo.
I know venues are for sale. New venue owners are going to come on. People are going to is through this renaissance. Whether you're a small business owner, or you're Nike Corporation, or you're Bose, or you're EV, it's all of how do we re-ramp up sales? How do we get people enthusiastic about our products? And I think you're going to see a lot of that regearing, getting people back together to focus in on the industry. So there's a lot of potential for the DJ industry out there, from event planning, from events to corporate functions, to just how well stuff has grown with trivia. And you know, all of the online things to have a family night and play music trivia or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and there's a number of DJs that have transitioned away from weddings and are just strictly doing that trivia and karaoke remotely and doing very well at it too.
They've had some good experience with that. So excellent, Jerry. I want to wrap things up here. So thank you very much for your time and such. If people want to reach out and had any questions, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
I would certainly through my website, jerry@maindiscjockey.com, or just drop me a quick note on Facebook, or even better yet, I'd love to see you all on LinkedIn. There's a lot of resources on LinkedIn, so certainly reach out. Actually would hopefully a lot of the DJs that listen to it set up a page on LinkedIn, because I'm seeing a lot more marketing coming through that. I'm seeing a lot more activity. So I'm putting a plug in for LinkedIn. So put a challenge out there. I'd love to get 100 LinkedIn requests from the DJ community over the next couple of weeks.
That sounds great. Jerry, once again, thank you very much for being with us. And thank you guys for being with us. We will catch you at the top of the hour with our next show with Dan and MJ. Thanks, everybody.